The original budget was around $350,000, but I think it surpassed that somewhere around 500. And the reason for that was mostly the helicopter issue. So the original plan was to fly the concrete up there and use the water that existed up there to mix on site. But it was an extraordinarily strange year last summer and dry up there, because the last 2 summers that I had been up there, there was actually a snow patch which could have been used for water, but it didn't exist last year. So they actually had to bring a concrete mixer in down to at the staging area, and then pour the concrete into that yellow thing and fly it up. And so that was a lot of expense. And plus the SIP panels. They're not very heavy, but it turns out they're actually quite fragile. So they were packaged in crates, which practically doubled the weight. So those 2 things alone, I think there was something like 100 helicopter hours at $2,000 an hour. You choose building materials that are low VOC, so that don't off-gas. And in my other life, I'm actually an indoor air quality consultant. So I can give advice on what building materials are appropriate for indoor environment and building. So that's what we tried to do. We tried to choose building materials that didn't off-gas, paints and sealants and adhesives and that kind of thing. So it's actually better to build an airtight building and provide ventilation than it is to do it the old-fashioned way, where the walls breathe and anything that's outside kind of there's infiltration and exfiltration, and which you can't control. But if you have an airtight building, well insulated, you can actually control what's in there. It takes a lot of solar energy a lot of electrical energy to create heat. So it's not very practical to use solar panels or even solar thermal to provide heating. Your best bet is to, I know like you, a lot of guys like technology, right? And we're gonna add solar panels and we're gonna do all this stuff, right? But the best bang for your buck is more insulation. That's gonna give you the best thermal control. So the reason why it's not to be used in summer is because it's in the national parks, and it was a national parks criteria. So we could use it. It's a wildlife issue. So wildlife frequent the area in the summer, and environmental protection is at the top of the list for Parks Canada. So it's just winter use only. Bears are usually tucked away at that time, and other megafauna don't frequent the area in the winters, so it's just a winter use only. And I can't speak to the economics of it. I was just involved in the design of the hut and the operation, but I can say that probably the revenue that comes in for the hut would not support the build. It would take a long time for it to for it to pay for itself.
I'll just pick up on Eric's comment. The build. I mean, this is a case in point of the completely different approaches between what is built in Canada and say what is built here. The huts in New Zealand are completely uninsulated or unheated, and the insulation is there as a serviceability component, but it's not intended to keep the users especially warm. A building like this flyable bivvy, there is no consideration for the internal heat, and in fact, thermal bridges are built into it deliberately. So it's got thermal bridging right across the bottom of it, which is something you would never do in Canada. So the SIPS panel is used for its structural capacity and its lightweight, without consideration for its insulation value. You could effectively build a hut which is similar to a tent, although they wouldn't last particularly well. They would flap. But for the purpose, for the structural purposes and the vernacular approach in New Zealand, that would be acceptable, which is possibly why I was labouring the coal thing, because that's just not, they're not heated.